Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Storied Arcs podcast. I am your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today we are diving back into the possibly twisted minds of James Tynion IV and Eric Donovan as they destroy the world once again. By the way, let me just say, from the outset of this one, totally called it. The world ended.
Yeah, you know what? Well done.
Really impressive insight. That's why people listen.
Yeah.
And I just had to take a victory lap now.
Yeah, listen, you got to take the victories when you can, even if they're layups. They're
yeah, they're free
when you're
points.
right, you're right.
They're more free throws than anything. Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
So I know you want to jump in with the letters. I just have to say the biggest disappointment to me about this book is from the very first page. I thought the dolphins were the superior race on Earth, and that they were actually doing the mind control, and that this was a plot instead of aliens like Memetic. This was dolphins finally taking their rightful place to rule the Earth.
Sea creatures.
Yeah, and I thought it was very Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So long and thanks for all the fish type thing. But I'm not displeased with how it turned out. I just had to say that before I forgot, just for my fellow hitchhikers out there.
Sure. Well, actually, before we get into it, I'm curious. I mean, now we've read the two of these here. Just like big overview thoughts on the two of them. How did you like this one? How did you like it in comparison to Memetic?
Yeah, and I think on some hand, it's like a little like it's unfair to each piece to keep comparing them. But it is. But, it's irresistible.
Well, yeah, but it's absolutely unfair, but that's 100% what we're going to do.
Since I've stated that it's unfair, I'm going to go ahead and compare them. And I think Cognetic did everything Memetic was going for. Yeah. So I mean, that's what I just kept thinking from the very outset. I was like, oh yeah, all the little things that were like, I see where he's going and it works for me. And again, stuck the landing with Memetic, so you can't complain too much. But from the outset here, it felt tighter. It felt more organized. The characters felt more meaningful, given how short and disposable they all are anyway.
Yeah.
And so I just felt like, yeah, all the things he was working on in Memetic felt fully fleshed out here.
I'm glad that's exactly where I was going, because I still the core idea behind Memetic, the idea of the weaponized meme, that's my favorite setup. And I'll spoil that now of all three of these books. That's my favorite setup. It's my favorite story. It's my favorite idea to think about. I like that more than what's presented here in Cognetic. This alien being that comes down that grants these kind of hive mind powers to people, which kind of you get into a similar spot with the similar-ish spot with Cognetic and Memetic on the idea of, the collective versus the individual. But I like the idea of Memetic the best, but I think Cognetic is a far superior story in terms of its construction, its presentation, its pacing, everything about it. I think it's so much better. I think you're right about that. You can see a lot of the things, a lot of the nits and comments we had in Memetic, I think are maybe not fully completely solved in Cognetic, but they're way better. They're way improved.
Yeah. And I have to say, so I looked on Goodreads. I gave Memetic 3 out of 5 stars. Mm-hmm. This I gave 4 out of 5. Mm-hmm. If logic holds, Eugenic would be 5 out of 5, but we'll
see when we get there. Sure.
Yeah. I was reading ahead of people's reviews of that. Non-spoiler reviews, although it's like, what is there to spoil? It's an end of the world. It's an apocalyptic book. And it seems like there's some consensus around Cognetic being people's favorite, which is not to say the best. It just, people seem to like this. So I don't know if it's one of those, like, by the time Eugenic came out, he was much more popular and people didn't want to feel like bandwagoners jumping on there. So they went back one. but maybe they went back both, and I don't think anyone can make the argument that Memetic is the best. So, it's the best concept.
That's an interesting look into the psychology of people who review things online, and I don't think you're necessarily wrong, because you can't be the guy that automatically says the first one is the best, right? You can't be that
Well, I mean,
hipster.
yeah, I mean, but that's like it's all too common in music. People are always
Well,
like,
yeah, it
"Oh, the
always,
first
yeah,
album was the best." I'm like,
yeah, yeah,
"Did you hear it? Like, it wasn't."
yeah, yeah,
Like, and a lot of times people's first album is the best because a band will be touring for 5 years, working on these songs over and over again. They go down to the studio, they lay them down, and then next year the label's like, "All right, dude, do it again." They're
yeah,
like, "It took 5 years to make
yeah.
that one."
Well, yeah. The
But
idea
that
that is that
doesn't seem to be the case with writers,
well,
right?
maybe not.
They're
Yeah,
just
but
a different.
yeah,
They're, I mean,
you're,
I think novels, yes, but comic writers tend to get a little better once they've got the first product finished on paper, and now they're like, okay, now I know the process, and I've
yeah,
still got all the ideas
yeah.
because it's not like not in an inflammatory way, but he's not coming up with new ideas really. Like
No, no,
he's
no, no.
he's
And I don't
he's
think I don't think he would claim to be
revisiting
either.
similar
Yeah,
ideas over and over
yeah,
again.
yeah, yeah. And
Um,
I don't think he would ever posit that either. It's all about how you frame that idea, how what's your
exactly.
presentation of the idea. Because yeah, an idea like this, the the larger hit points are are fairly common. The idea of alien mind control or whatever, like that what we're dealing with here in Cognetic. Maybe not the exact specifics that we see here, but yeah, they're he's not reinventing anything here. He's putting his spin on it, and I think the way he presents it here, I think as a read is more compelling than Memetic. One thing we talked about with last week with the Memetic, I think you and I both agreed on, is specifically around the main character there, Aaron, being kind of a nothing burger for a while there, and yet he's being our main protagonist through most of the story. But the issue there being that every time we're following him, it seems like the story's not going anywhere. It's a little draggy. There's some pacing issues. You don't know what's going on until the very end, and then he gets the big speech at the end, and then you see kind of what the big idea, capital B, capital I, is all about. But like the lead up to it was kind of a little bit of a slog. It didn't feel like you were really invested. I think he corrects that with Cognetic here, because I think with Annie, you are thrown right in, and you're given a lot more about her character, and just as you're getting to have an understanding of maybe who she is, like stuff starts to go awry immediately, you
right.
know, and you're thrown into this larger world of what's happening. And the thing I wanted to point out in the letter in the back from is specifically Tynion's letter. So in the back of the trade, if that's how you read it, which I think most people read at this point, there are 3 letters. First letter is from Jamestown in the fourth. The second letter is from Eric Donovan, and the third is similar to what you saw at the back of Memetic, which is kind of a back and forth between the two, like it's presented like they're texting back and forth. And I believe the way they were printed was Tynion's letter was in the back of issue 1, Donovan's letter was the back of issue 2, and then the two of them were in the final issue of issue 3. But in the trade, they're all there together. But the point I wanted to mention in Tynion's letter is he talks about this intro, and the point he's building to is the idea that escalation is the key in fiction. And he makes mention of, he references the story he wrote as a junior in high school for a class assignment that he wanted to shock his peers, where at the end of every paragraph the story took a wild turn they never saw coming. And he said the story started with a 16-year-old girl or a teenage girl who didn't have a date to prom, and it ended with the nuclear annihilation of the United States of America. And
Nice.
he says he thought about putting that story, including that story in the back matter, and then he said it wasn't very good and he didn't want to do that. So while I'll take his word that it's not a good story, I'm dying to know what the steps are. Like I have to know how that, I don't need the specifics of who the characters are, but just like that little bit of a tease is I got to know what I have to know, how we go from, promless date, teenage girl to nuclear destruction. But that's what he's talking about, this idea of escalation. And I think Cognetic does that brilliantly. I mean, it's built on that, where very, very quickly things go from 0 to 100, and then when you think,
and it's the fact that it's faster than anyone can comprehend.
well, yes,
Right?
yes.
I mean,
Yeah. Well,
it's like
for both. Well, and
people
that's
don't believe it's actually happening at the
and that's
scale it
for,
is, including our main character.
I was going to say that's works on two levels, both for the characters in the story and us, the reader. You know, like we're being a little slow play those early pages of and I'll refer to these characters the way that Tynion and Donovan refer to them later in their back and forth. You know, our main character is Annie, but ultimately they call her Red, and her brother is Blue. So they refer to these entities by the color because they don't have names from back in the day. But we see Blue before we have any idea what's going on. We can see that he is tapping into this hive mind, and it's a glorious thing with the way they do the lettering. You know, it's a very simple thing of any letters, whether they're spoken or even sound effects. You learn to see how they're color coded. So we know that anything spoken in blue is part of his hive mind. Anything spoken in red is Red's hive mind. Later on, at the very end, when we see
yellow,
when she calls her younger brother, we see yellow, and we know there had been others in the past there. So it's such a simple
and the
visual
pupil
clue.
color. Yeah.
Well, yeah. There is that visual there. So where you can, that's where you can see someone is turned, but you know from text that even if you can't see that, when you're seeing all that color, you know that's the whole collective. So we see Blue collecting these people, as it were. And then before we have any sense of what's going on, people are jumping off the roof of the Empire State Building, you know, which is a harrowing sight. It's a harrowing thing to think about. I think there are, to not to go super dark here, but like there are allusions to that, especially in New York City, to like 9/11, of people trapped on the top floors deciding to leap out of the building. And maybe I'm addle-brained, but my mind goes to that. But it's a shocking sight, because before you have any idea what's going on, before you know what this entity wants, he's just making people kill themselves by jumping off the building. And we come to find out there's no reason for that other than to get his sister's attention. You know, he's doing that. It's in his mind or its mind, it's simple shock value. But we see how quickly this mind control, this hive mind collective can escalate there, to use that word again. And it throws everyone in the story off, because they're like, we have no idea what's going on. Like, what is happening? Is this a religious thing, mass suicide? Oh my God. And then as a reader, you're what, halfway through the first issue, and it's like, holy crap, what is going on here? You know? And then it ends with the stinger of, oh wait, no, our Annie character is one of them. You know, because now we see when she speaks at the end of that final page of that issue and her text is in red, now you know that, oh, she must be one of them, just like we see Blue. And so that puts you on a course now of, well, God, anything can happen, you know? And of course, I think that's a given, I guess, because we are talking about stories about the end of the world. So when we're talking about stories about the end of the world, the idea is that the world is going to end. So thus, of course, anything can happen, because the end result is the end of everything. But I think this book does a good job, at least I found it having a good job, of not so much putting you on the back foot, but putting you on edge of like, oh, now I don't know what the end result is going to be. And I definitely couldn't have guessed that it was going to be like two giant golems, basically, you know.
They did look a little like Rock'em Sock'em.
A little bit, yeah, but
in their design, but yeah,
but that being like a big climax and basically being like a giant kaiju fight, I wouldn't have predicted how that end gets, how that being the end for this kind of idea of the hive mind,
and for it to be a fake climax.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes,
it's just a ploy.
Yeah, it's one giant distraction, and yeah, what I would not have guessed that. Our character Annie here, our ostensible main character, our protagonist, her ultimate, like her deciding or thinking that the only way to do this is I have to nuke New York, you know, and then to actually do it, and then to think she's won, and then be like, no, you didn't, you know, and just that idea of this is a kind of story, because of how it starts in that first issue. You don't know what to expect. And it is that idea. I think it goes back to what Tynion said in that letter there, of after every paragraph, he wanted to take the story somewhere that was completely unexpected. And so to get that level of escalation, I think is effective for this book and this story, given the potential of what you could do with the idea of the collective hive mind. One mind controlling everything. There are so many things you can do with that, so you can go in any direction. And I thought it was really effective in this book.
Yeah, and what you just described, I could see going so poorly when someone feels the need. Well, yeah. But I mean, that's like listening to a toddler tell a story, and they know every time they come up with a new twist, they like escalate it, and they feel your attention rise. Yeah. So they just keep throwing crazy stuff at you. It's like, then. So it's like that by itself. Yes, that is how escalation in terms of storytelling happens. That doesn't make it inherently good.
That's a very fair point. These aren't non sequiturs. They're right. They're not random things. But
he's not writing as he goes, because I think that is my problem in a lot of comic arcs that I feel like are too long. Are like, I feel like they're trying to milk it for 50, 60, 150 issues, whatever. And a lot of times they have that kind of escalation where it's something that doesn't even fit with the first 12 issues, but now they have kind of forgotten where they came from. They're so wrapped up in the moment, and they know they need to get us to a higher level to keep selling books.
Yeah. And I think maybe what Tynion has done here is not so much his escalation. I think for this book is less making hard left turns. He's just skipping steps.
Right? He's going, you can fill in the gaps.
Yeah, as opposed to going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He's gone 1, 2, 3, 19. Right. And then 19, 20, 38. He's jumping up. Yeah, you can see how the story would have gone and filled in. But instead of taking time to flesh out those stories or give you those details, he's like, no. We're just going to jump ahead to the middle here and throw you in there again. And you got to play catch up, and you got to figure out what's going on. And then once you get that, we're going to jump it up again. But there is a linear progression there from the beginning to the end. It's just that you don't hit all the steps. You're jumping 5, 6, 9 steps in between sometimes, just because he wants to keep you on your toes. So yeah, again, he's not making random non sequiturs. He's taking things where I think he thinks they would go. He's just eliminating the middle stuff.
Right. Yeah, and I think one thing that could have been interesting is like the massive kaiju splash page. If that was like the second and third pages of the book, and it says 12 hours from now. And you're like, holy, what? Which is very similar to Memetic, right? He shows day 3, and then you cut back, and then you're in day 1. And you don't see day 3 again until day 3.
And I bet I would be willing to bet he chose not to do that in this case because he had done it before.
Sure.
It
would have made it feel like it would have like extended that spiritual bond between the two stories.
True. But if Memetic didn't exist, or that he had used a different framing advice, that would totally work here. Yeah, where you see the giant kaiju and you don't know what they're made of. You just see them like in the distance.
There's no way you can tell.
Yeah. But yeah, that would have been a great tease there of like, and yeah, but that's a storytelling trick that you can only use so often. It's a framing device you can only go back to so often. But I agree that would have fit this book. In terms of what he was presenting. Absolutely.
So no shade thrown at last week's colors, but I felt that the coloring this week from Juan Manuel, what's the last name is Tumboras or something?
Tumboras. Yeah. I mean, good luck with apologies to the non-English language. Yeah.
Please accept our compliments of your artwork in exchange for our butchering of your name. I felt like he brought even more out of like the penciling and inks of Donovan. So much shading, so much texture and nuance to the coloring. The kind of watercolory cloud backgrounds. I don't know if even the first page of the book, you see it.
I don't know what page you're thinking of right now. I happen to be on one
the first page of the book.
Okay.
Like the dolphin, there's probably 20 shades of blue on that dolphin. The man's face, who's saying, "Come on, man, try to put yourself in its shoes." He has like a red nose and a furrowed brow, and there's shading. So which side the light's coming from, and it's all very cinematic and beautiful. And there's And now it could also be that while I was reading this, I was flipping back and forth between this and old like Copper Age Daredevil books, like early 80s, and the coloring just was what it was.
Yeah.
So I don't even know if I was making a comparison
Well,
between Memetic and Cognetic, but
I think he's asked to do a little more here than the colors that we saw in Memetic. The page that I happen to be on right now is towards the beginning of issue 2, after the flashback of our origin story, I guess, and it's the half page splash of Blue sitting on his throne of people, and you see kind of the cloudyish blue sky behind him, and then the outline of the Empire State Building, and
yep.
that's infilled with like an orange red fire. It's got a real end of Ghostbusters kind of portal door through feel to it. But like that contrast there, the way the sky looks, I think this one was asked to do a lot more. And maybe that was just them, also could be Tynion and Donovan stepping their game up, wanting to tell a little more detail. But I think maybe it has something to do potentially maybe with a little bit of the world. For
sure,
all the
yeah.
Well, because the similarities between there are major similarities between Cognetic and Memetic. Again, it's the idea of the loss of individualism, right? It's the idea of the collective versus the individual. But in Memetic, I guess, well, ultimately they both have a extraterrestrial origin, although that is not important to either plot. In Memetic, it's more of collective, the collectivism through like the loss of individuality. So everyone kind of reverts to like a zombie state, right? So it's kind of like a dead world, where no one's acting on just this base impulse to be together, right?
Right.
Simply removing the idea of the self, and people revert back to this base idea of wanting to be a collective herd. So maybe in that way the world that's in Memetic is a specific dying world, and so I think the colors there in a lot of ways, especially with some of the scenery and the outside shots, a little more muted, a little darker, not as vibrant. I think with this world here in Cognetic, again, it's a loss of individualism, but it's at the will of someone else. Your free will is being replaced by a third party, so an outside source, right?
I mean, is this not just all? So the comp that I had was Loki in the first Avengers movie, his speech in Germany, where he says, I've come to free humanity. He says, from what? And he says, freedom.
Yeah,
it's like
absolutely there. But again, I think the difference there is how, again, for these two books, how that freedom is achieved. Is it Memetic removes the self and everyone just herds into being one collective. Here in Cognetic, these entities, Blue is bringing everyone together under his will. So it's loss of free will by being taken over by something else, and that brings everyone together. With the idea being that, I guess Blue would say basically like, you can't be trusted with it. I know what's right. So as opposed to Memetic, which was just breaking down everybody, everyone lose their individualism and the world goes away. Blue is saying, you guys just keep screwing up. You're not supposed to be like this. So I'm going to tell you what to think and feel and what to do. I'm going to control you. And not just Blue, but all the colors, all of them are thinking that way. So that's, I think, is the nuanced difference there in terms of kind of an active versus a passive choice, I think,
again, the Loki comp, he says, is this not your natural state? It's the unspoken truth of humanity that you crave subjugation. The bright lure of freedom diminishes your life's joy in a mad scramble for power, for identity. Yeah. And again, now he's making these speeches as if he doesn't have the Mind Stone, in Avengers. So he is doing it forcefully as well, even though he's trying to plead with them and make them understand why he's doing this thing. Whereas Blue is like, no, I don't know you an explanation. Like, I will argue the merits with my brother and sisters, the only people on my level, but I don't owe the people that I'm taking control of.
The people are nothing. Yeah, obviously, right. He doesn't care about them. Doesn't even really care about it is a little unclear at the end, like what his goal is. Like, does he want to rule everybody, or does he just want to get rid of everybody? And it seems to be kind of like he's created these giant kaiju golems, and they're just going to destroy the cities or whatnot. But yeah, there is the idea of him that he's making an active choice to take over everyone's mind, which is then removing that choice from the people there. And I think it was either in Tynion's letter, or I think Tynion said it either in his letter, his solo letter, or his back and forth with Donovan in the back matter, talking about how, it's something that we talked about as well. The end of Memetic ends with a character making an active choice to join the collective. Aaron being the outsider,
right?
He can't see the image, he can't hear the noise, but still choosing in the end to join and be part of this greater thing, because he sees that as his only choice, versus what we have in Cognetic, which no one is able to make that choice. No being is able to make an active choice.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, not necessarily in or out. However, I am thinking of Red's partner is, moved over to this island and basically said, don't worry, I've spared you, and you're gonna have a life here. And I think her partner's like, what is the point of this? Like, if the whole world is ending, like, what difference does it make? Like, we're so screwed.
And
I think kind of wants out.
Yeah, well, but I think, I think she wants out, but doesn't mean she wants to join the collective. It's more just like, why aren't we doing more? And I think that goes to, I think, kind of the end point in the conversation that Red has with Yellow. The idea that
really sounds like we're discussing a Pixar movie.
It really does. But Yellow basically tells Red that we did all this under, basically we tried to imprison and trap Blue because of what he was doing, because we thought it was wrong, because you convinced us it was wrong, because you thought he was being selfish by trying to control and rule the entire world with his collective. And Yellow basically calls her out, saying, but like, no, like, the choice that you made is selfish, because you wanted something different. And I'm trying to flip back through here. He talks about how you convinced us that the small victories, the small moments, those are the ones worth living for, and that's what's important. And I think we see that in that interaction with Annie's partner on the island there, when she's like, listen, we can stay here and be fine as long as it's us, just the two of us,
right?
We're good. And her partner's like, what are you talking about? Like, yes, I want to be with you, but like, if there's no world, like, what the hell are we doing this for? But the way that Annie sees it, the way that Red sees it, is like, no, this is the thing that I want. All I want is you, and be here right now to live this life with you. And basically, like, to hell with everything else, because as we find out, she's there with her partner and their daughter. And she has also taken over the US government and is about to nuke New York,
right?
Like, she's already decided, she believes she can end this, but it's okay, because I'm here and I have the thing that I want. And I can't save everybody out there, but maybe I can stop my brother. At what cost? It doesn't matter, because all she wants, she's focused on the one thing, the only thing that she wants. And I think it's interesting that Red calls her out on that. I'm sorry, the Yellow calls her out on that, because again,
which I actually thought was a great point. I felt like, what, like, why is he still making points here after the world's over? What difference does it make? But then I thought, oh yeah, like, I was only like kind of pulling for her because, one, she was trying not to end the world, but also we've been following her. But she's insanely selfish.
Yes, exactly.
She's a terrible person.
Yeah. Yellow is not wrong there, and I think this is it. Then there is then a you can see how that fits now with the ending of Memetic, with the idea that our ostensible protagonist, it's, again, there, our ostensible protagonist, the one guy that you normally think in the story, because he's immune to all of this, he's our savior, right? He's the key to saving all of this. And he's like, nope, I'm out. And that's how the world ends. Any potential hope that just dies right there, and the whole world is gone. So our not that he's doing the whole flawed protagonist thing, but just the idea that the character you're following, your ostensible main character, is either unable or unwilling to try and save the world, to do the thing that we expect our characters to do in these types of stories, which is fight for the survival of the world, which is to battle back and to try and win. Red had no desire of winning. It was she was okay. She was playing the game so Blue would lose, and she thought she had that, and losing meant destroying all of nuking New York. And if that came out to be a draw, so be it, because she was still alive on the island. Of course, then she learns from Yellow that no, Blue's in like every major city, and you never had a chance. Like you lost this game before you even showed up on the Empire State Building. But she thinks that's what she's doing. She's motivated by that idea that I can fix this, I can do this, and I can have the thing that I want. I'm not going to try to fix anything here. I guess maybe that goes back to one of the flashbacks we saw when they were imprisoning Blue the first time. They were saying how it would take them a millennia or whatnot of mind control to get human beings to live on their own again. So it's like they're controlling them. They're controlling humanity to act as if they have their own free will, just to teach them how to do that. And it's almost like she doesn't want to try and fix anything anymore this time. She doesn't care about fixing the world. It's just about ending Blue,
Yeah, I mean, I saw her.
There's no drive to be greater than that.
Yeah, I mean, I thought she was playing to win, but her idea of winning was just having this one person that has taken her hundreds of years to find someone she cares about.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Which is like equally. Okay, well, we're a family-friendly podcast, so I had to censor myself there. Yeah. Equally crappy way to be, and not a very lofty idea of winning when you're as old as you are and you can see the stakes from that view.
That is that is fair. She thought she was winning her game. I guess I was speaking the idea of she wasn't trying to win again in that stereotypical idea of these stories of humanity winning. She wasn't trying to win for everybody. She was winning for herself. Yeah, there's nothing
vicarious about it.
No. Yeah, there was nothing outside of her that she wanted to accomplish. So yeah, in that way, Yellow is totally right. She is selfish about it, and calls her out on the idea of, now, how much of this is this her fault? Because they let humans exist on their own, and this is what we led to. I think again there's that commentary on humanity of left to our own devices, we're just terrible. That's the argument that Yellow kind of makes, right? Like, says like, look, we gave them free will. We backed out. We fought, we listened to you. We imprisoned Blue. We gave them back the free will, and look what they've done for the past couple thousand years. There are no better.
I mean, yes, although I think the only nuance I would add there is, left to their own devices, they don't know what to do, and eventually someone with an agenda will come and take over them because they're so susceptible, so manipulatable, that even without this mind control, I mean, look at the atrocities in the last 100 years. Humanity has been coerced without this kind of cognetic mind control to commit. And
that's fair.
There was commentary leaning pretty heavily early on that I was reading on my couch, so I was taking pictures with my phone of key panels, which is like the most hack way to do it. But when Annie's texting her partner and she says, I like being behind the scenes, I know what to do there.
Yeah.
I hate being in Josh's shoes. You have no idea what kind of crazy things people ask him all day. And then you see that there's this kind of jockeying back and forth. And then they keep saying, and she says, they keep talking. She says, I'm pretty sure that I'm not supposed to tell you what my bosses say. So she's like trying to be human by being like passive and docile. Mm-hmm. And not wanting to call the shots. And then we see her boss, and anytime he's alone, he's like frantically texting her, like, I don't know what to do. I need my advisors. I need to make a decision. Like, someone tell me what's going on. Tell me what to do. And it's like, oh, even the people in leadership are kind of this wimpy, pandering, like, don't really know what to do. And so instead of zooming way out and telling us about humanity. He shows it to us very briefly on a small scale and then extrapolates from that. And then there's the escalation. It's like, well, if this is true for person one and it's true for person one's boss, now imagine it's true for all of humanity.
Yeah.
That's quite an escalation, but he's telling a short story.
Yeah. And I like that there. The positioning of Annie and the way she sees herself in this world, that there's an admission there, right? When she says she likes being behind the scenes, she likes being the person someone relies on. And that when we see how much her boss relies on her and who her boss is, what is it? The head of the FBI, right? Like,
right.
This is a serious position with massive consequences in terms of what this man does. She still likes to have some level of control there,
Well, and she likes him to have his autonomy because
yes.
she knew what was happening instantly. She could have taken control of the head of the FBI instead of telling him multiple times, create a perimeter around this, like 10 blocks. She could have forcefully done that, but is like she needs an Uncle Ben real bad.
Yeah.
Great power comes great responsibility.
Well, but I mean, yes, I guess there, but I think she would argue in that moment that is responsibility of like, I can't, it is irresponsible or immoral in some level in her eyes to do what she ended up doing, which is just take over her boss, which then leads her to taking over the government, and acting unilaterally, as opposed to trying to get them to do the things they need to do, as opposed to just making them do it. Now, I guess there is on some level of like, she has to know that nothing she could say can make anyone understand what's happening, So
right.
they're
there's no way you could explain it other than commandeering people.
So you could say her trying to do that is futile from the beginning, and she should know that after all these years, that you can't explain this to anybody. They're not going to be able to wrap their head around the idea of this. So in a way, not that she's complicit, but it's almost like she like actively didn't do enough, by trying to get them to understand just through like, hey, this is what you got to do. You got to trust me on this. This is what you got to do. And no person's going to be like, well, why should I listen to you? Like, what do you know? And her only option was to go all the way and just to do it, which is obviously something she didn't want to do. She was trying to resist doing.
To me, it seems like once you see what he's doing and the scale he's doing it, you can't be like screwing around with these lines anymore.
And I think that's a flaw, not an intentional character flaw for Annie, is that she never saw the bigger picture. That when she understood right away what was happening and didn't play the tape to the end, even though there was only one end. Every time she thought she knew maybe what Blue was up to or what Blue wanted, Blue was already 15 steps ahead of her, So it shouldn't have taken it shouldn't have taken all those bodies to be thrown off the Empire State Building for her to show up there. As soon as she recognized what it was, she had to have known that she was the only one that could do anything about it. That nothing any one of the people on the ground could do, which again, and the more I talk about it, you're like, well, any person that this is a very matrixy thing, right? Any person that she just talks to and doesn't possess is someone that Blue could possess.
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah.
So the idea that
you gotta unplug them from the matrix or they're a potential agent.
Yeah. So the idea that she thinks she could just talk to someone and get them to do the steps to counteract what Blue is doing, when Blue can simply expand his mind and take over them because
she thinks she can persuade people as quickly. I mean, I think the real selfishness is that she has this image of herself as someone who's not willing to do this,
as being the good
one.
She
feels superior to him because of that.
Yeah.
And it does remind me of, I think you still haven't read Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil.
No.
But it has a kind of a classic superhero trope for street level heroes where he goes to jail. Sure. And there's a guy in jail who's like, come on, man. Like, what are you doing here? Like, you don't have to be here. And he's like, yeah, I do. Killed a guy or whatever. And it's like, but like, you don't have to be here. Like the authorities would let you out. This is all your Catholic guilt. and your guilty conscience, and you could be out there helping people, but because of your own selfish self-image, you're going to serve hard time in here with us, even though you're not like us and you're not serving the same time as us. And it was like, ooh, that stings, especially, to like the pious religious legalist of Matt Murdock.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, it was a great beat, because it was like, oh, dang, that's something that character's been hiding behind for like 40, 50 years now. And Zdarsky just went right at him.
It's that hubris, right? It's the idea that, like I'm so much better than these people, but yet, you think yourself on a certain level, but then you in some ways you're actually on that level, but your own perception of how that's reflected in the world is skewed because of that hubris.
And eventually you're willing to sacrifice things in order to preserve the self-image rather than in order to be the person you set out to be.
Yeah, instead of doing the thing. Yeah.
Right. And that's the dangerous part.
So Red here thinks she's the good one. She thinks she's moral and ethical and presumably has lived this life, as she says to her partner on the island there, through that she never possesses more than two people at a time, right? And that she only possesses someone who is like lost and on the end and who would be forgotten. And even I think about that, you're thinking, okay, so you possess this soul like who was lost, alone, and dying and had nowhere else to go. And your choice was to take over their life and do what you wanted to do. Like, couldn't you have taken over that life and saved that person and returned them to whatever their life was? Like,
right. It's living in this
wouldn't that be
dichotomy of choices.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be the moral choice versus no one's gonna miss this person, so I can take over them, do what I want. Like that
well, and
that's
in this way,
an ethical choice.
And in this way, don't you think she actually has become more human? Like, I mean, that's her goal. She's trying to live among humans. And we do this to ourselves all the time, right? We like tie ourselves in moral knots, ethical knots of a moral. Actions. Right.
Yeah.
Did you ever watch The Good Place?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So this very cheaty situation.
Yeah.
Where it's you have this strict Kantian code.
Yeah.
And, when like everyone in the show is going to die unless he could just tell a little simple white lie or deception while they're in hell. And he's like, oh, I can just never be untruthful. It's like wrong according to Kantian ethics. And they were like, if you don't lie in the next 30 seconds, we all die. How does that weigh in your scales of justice? He's like, a hardcore Kantian is like, doesn't matter. I can't do the wrong thing in any instance, which, but
then goes to the definition of what's the wrong thing,
Well, and that was
what
central
have
debate.
You told yourself? What have you convinced yourself is right and wrong?
Right, and the central debate of Captain America: Civil War, the movie, was Captain America's kind of Kantian deontology ethics of like, I will never do wrong by one person. I will never let go of my personal responsibility over this. I'll take the blame. Versus Tony Stark's consequentialism, which is like, you make this trade here, that trade there, and we'll get everything kind of worked out. The problem is like they needed each other's corrective, and each of them was taking their philosophy for the wrong reason. So it didn't actually. The movie, I felt like, didn't take a stance on which philosophy was correct, but it situationally which was right for the character's growth, which I think is actually a better way to view a lot of situational ethics, especially in storytelling. I think Annie is a great character to follow for an apocalyptic story that doesn't have a redemption. Because
I think
miserable character at the end. You're like, fine, blow her up. Who cares? I'm not gonna feel sad that she's left on Earth and that she failed because I don't care about her goals.
But that doesn't come at the expense of. That doesn't come at the expense of always thinking like, oh yeah, but Blue was right then. It doesn't come at the expense.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. As you follow the story, you are ostensibly on Annie's side. You're on Red's side, and then you get to the end, and you're like, maybe not. maybe not, but
You're
it
like,
isn't.
oh, they're
Yeah, yeah,
all awful.
yeah, exactly.
There's
Yeah,
different kinds of awful.
it's not a double flip where you're like, oh no, but Blue was the hero the whole time because this is what he was doing. No, you're like, no, you suck and you suck and you suck, and you know what? We never had a chance. Like you're the end. The kind of end feeling is like, well, it's kind of how Red feels at the end. Then when she realized that she was never in the game. She had no chance at all. This as a reader, you look at and you're like, yeah, you know what? All these characters terrible. All 6 of them, none of them are good. There was no way we're getting out of this. But so I like that kind of thing, and I like that what he's kind of what Tynion and Donovan have presenting here, and I think it's why this one works is a little more more effective in the storytelling. Excuse me, because you get to that end, you're following through, and it's very natural. You get nothing that we've been shown from Annie, because when Yellow speaks to her at the end, it isn't the first time we've heard or thought about these things, because we had that confrontation with her partner,
right?
With she calls her out also being like, so you've been lying to me for 14 years? And he's like, have I? Yeah, maybe, kind of, not really, depending how you look at it, from a certain point of view. I don't know. So
right, lying to your partner for the entire relationship isn't wrong, but controlling people to stop a genocidal maniac, that's wrong.
Yeah, I can't do that. Yeah, so it doesn't come out again. It doesn't come out of the blue. So it isn't like a hard turn of like, now our hero is the bad guy. People have been calling her out, and we see her kind of very naturally. And also the idea that she just ordered a nuclear strike on New York. Her option, she literally went to the nuclear option there. There was like, oh, I can't fix any of this. All I can do is end it. The only option is to end this. So yeah, she's not meant to be sympathetic. I don't think you're not supposed to do that. And I agree. I like that for this kind of story. I like you get to the end and you're like, well, of course we all lost. Of course no one won, because all the characters who had the power are terrible. We never had a chance. There are no heroes in this story. There are no good guys really.
Right. Yeah. Well, and just to continue the small streak of West Wing comps, to quote Josh Lyman, there's no way this will end good. All that's left is to end it fast. And, that was her nuclear button.
Yeah.
However, she was, and that's from the state dinner, I think also in season 1. Annie was being a real Mandy in this one.
Yeah.
If anyone other than the two of us tracks that analogy, you go watch the state dinner on the West Wing, you'll totally get it.
Yeah. And you don't, all respect to Moira Kelly, but you don't want to be Mandy.
No,
you don't want to. You
don't want to live in Mandyville.
No, you don't want to get sent to Mandyville. It's very bad. But yeah, no, I'm going to be very interested now for people. So have just as we're recording this right now, have you read Eugenic yet?
Just first issue.
Okay.
Yeah, which I actually got. I have one single issue. I'm just gonna have to break down and read it digitally, because the single issues are difficult to track down, more so for Eugenic than the others. And I couldn't find the trade unless I was just willing to pay full, I don't know, $17. But can I talk about the trade reading experience just briefly here?
Okay,
because it uses a very heavy cardstock on the cover and very thick pages here. Mm-hmm. I actually found it difficult to keep open and read, and now that I've read it, you can see it it won't stay closed.
Yeah, there is.
It's so thick for so little. So I think they were trying to make it feel more substantial than 3 issues.
Well, I think also that they wanted to feel a higher quality too. Because the paper is nicer. It's going to hold. It's not going to bleed. It's not going to fade. It's a little sturdier.
Right. But it's a semi-gloss.
Once you open it, not saying that you've cracked the spine, right? But just when you've opened it.
No, I worked very hard not to.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm I own so many books. I have religious methodology for opening a book properly before reading it so that the spine doesn't crack.
No, I'm a similar. I wouldn't say I go that far, but I'm similar. I am the person that it doesn't look like I've read a book multiple times, because, you know, like I know people, and again, you feel free to enjoy your books, your prose books, your comics, however, any way you want. They'll show you a book. It's like my favorite book. I've read it a dozen times, and it looks like it's been shredded by a dog.
Yeah, that's my wife's copy of Jane Eyre.
And I will have a book. I'll have books that I've read 3, 4, 5, 6 times, whatever. Some of my favorite books, and they will basically look pristine. And people were like, "Well, you haven't read that book?" It's like, no, I read it all the time. Just, yeah, there's for me, it's a certain way that I have to do it. So yeah, I get that with you. So yeah, I think what they were trying to do, and I have to assume, because it's creator owned stuff, just like it is with any other thing like an image. The creators get to decide all these things. You get to make all the choices,
right,
of you know, what kind of cardstock for the cover, for the pages, all of that stuff. Is it glossy, semi-glossy, whatever it is? You get to make all those choices. And obviously a lot of that comes down to the presentation you want to give, how much you want to spend on it, you as the creator, you know, how much it's going to cost you to get this printed for the materials. So yeah, I think it was a matter of I would assume they wanted to feel a little fancier, a little nicer, a little, I don't know about more substantial in terms of content. Maybe that could have been a thing.
I mean, on a shelf even, but
yeah, but I think the idea of anytime you have a heavier stock paper, that there is an air of quality to that, because it's going to cost more. It's going to last longer. Yeah.
I will say
it may not be the best avenue always for the reading experience. You know, again, your mileage varies on that. But
when you pick it up in the store, you would feel like, oh my gosh, this is so high quality.
It's hefty, right? Yeah.
And then when you lay down on the couch and you're trying to hold it open while you're reading, it's like, hold on now. So I think it's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, the person picking this didn't think about the final end user experience of someone trying to read this book. But I will say this seems to happen more with Boom than any other studio in my experience. So like Image, it seems like, especially when they do the $9.99 for the first trade, it seems like the artists don't get any input on that. Like that's pretty cut and dry. They can make them this way for this price.
Well, no, I think they do that, but they price them that way. So I know, talking to, you know, reading stuff and listening to stuff from creators, again, they get to decide all of that stuff. That is all on them, because there are different qualities. You get different types of specifically cardstock on your covers. Again, sometimes it's glossy, like, you know, something like I don't know why this is the first that came to mind, but like you pick up a trade paperback of The Wicked and the Divine. That's pretty stocky. It feels pretty dense.
It is, yeah.
It's got a nice glossy cover to it. Then if you pick up a trade for Deadly Class, that's got like a matte finish to it. It doesn't have a glossy finish. It's got a nice cardstock cover, but it's specifically non-glossy. It doesn't have a shine to it. You know,
the interior of both books I thought were about the same in terms of paper weight.
Exactly. Whereas on that side, yes. Yeah.
But in Boom, I think
you have those choices.
Interior pages are pretty thick.
They are.
They're thicker than normal. I had the same problem with Grass Kings, and I had that in single issue, and I had that bound into a book, and the guy emailed me. He's like, I've already cut the books apart. I'm ready to like glue it together. But like these covers are so thick, it's gonna look funny. And I was like, it's just like built-in bookmarks. I'll deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, and I think specifically with Grass Kings, that is a level of cardstock that you just generally don't see for those covers in comics.
And they're so gorgeous.
It's beautiful. It looks great. It works great for the book. And again, this is the creators deciding on how they want to present their story. But yeah, that's a level of cardstock that is unusual. But I think it's something that
and that did not bother me when I was reading in single issues.
Yes.
Yeah. It's only when, and I think it wouldn't have mattered here if the book was just a little thicker. It's like a more pages.
So when you open it with a little more weight,
there'd be a little more weight on each side. Yeah.
To open up. Okay.
Let's say if they make an Apocalyptic Trilogy, like trade paperback omnibus, I think it'd be perfect.
Okay. So for the folks at home, we don't really plan how these things go. We both have our set of notes here.
You got to be kidding me.
Yeah, no.
This is happening.
Where this started was I asked if you had read Eugenic,
Mm-hmm.
Because Memetic and Cognetic are they have a very similarish story, and also not just by theme, but also how the story is told. Like the story takes place over a couple of days. Memetic, the world ends in a couple of days. Cognetic, it ends over a couple of days too. Eugenic is a much different type of story there. But again, it's still part of the thematic trilogy. And where I was going before we got on this tangent about cardstock was that I am curious for when people get to that book and assess how it fits in the overall trilogy, with the idea of looking at, like, what if these books at some point down the line were printed together? What if it's marketed as the Apocalyptic Trilogy and you were to read them, Memetic, Cognetic, Eugenic, as we're doing it? If Eugenic would end up maybe feeling a little bit out of place because the story and the approach, the theme is very different. The approach is very different. The kind of the storytelling mechanism is very different. So that's a teaser for next week there. So I'm curious to see how that plays with readers, especially who are reading them in if they're reading along with us in quick successive order. Because again, if we go back to as these were coming out, it was 2014 for Memetic, 2015 for Cognetic, then 2017 for Eugenic, and in between that time, Tynion as a writer went from a guy doing backup stories in Batman to a guy writing detective.
Right.
So he as a writer leveled up, and his profile leveled up. And I don't know if that plays into how they decided to tell the third story, but I wonder if it'll feel to people when you read them in quick succession, if it does feel like an outlier, and if there is any more or less of a connection to the other two beyond just this is a way that the world can end. So that's kind of where I was going with the idea of, I wonder one day if they would put all these three into a collective deluxe hardcover or whatnot, because they are harder to find. And I think that really comes down to, like, they didn't get massive print runs, they're not printing hundreds of thousands of copies of these. I'm sure they sold,
especially like Boom now. Like, I think shop owners will order a little bit more of a Boom title because there's recognition of the brand. But in 2014,
a Boom title, a new Boom #1, written by James Tynion IV, drawn by literally anyone, would be one of the biggest books.
I'm saying you're right, but compare that to
back then,
any Boom title in 2014.
Oh yeah,
it's that's pretty boutique, pretty.
Yeah, Boom at that point had a bit of a hipster cred. It was like, oh, you just read Image books, that's cool. Like Image has gone too mainstream now, like Image sold out or something like that, and oh, Dark Horse and IDW, they have all these licensed properties, they're all sellouts. Boom had this hipster kind of cred, real underground, and I think again they were very smart about their output in that they didn't put a lot of stuff out. So yeah, back then it was there. I think there was a sense of, if you were reading a Boom title, that like you were the cool kids,
Yeah, which like
you were the in crowd, and so it's harder to find these books because they just didn't get printed. So if you go out there and try to track down single issues, I'll be honest, I'm trying to track down the single issues, because I want to have them. I read them in trade.
I'm trying to track down the Robbie Rodriguez variants for Eugenic, and those are very. I got the first one, and that's it. I can't even get a whiff of the other ones for other like $30-$40, which I
they're
I like the quest, the hunt of cover price. If somebody has it bagged and boarded at a show or something, I'll pay cover price plus the bag and board, but I'm not paying $20-$30 for a variant cover.
I'm a sicko, so I'm for depending on who it is and what the cover is and how rare it is, I'm totally worth doing that. But the idea, even some of that, the issues, they're harder to find, and obviously digital is always there. You can always read it that way, but I wonder, and it's one of those things now that I kind of wonder, especially as, again, even just the past like 5 years, Tynion stock has risen astronomically, and with merit, with reason, and especially the fact he still has a deep relationship with Boom, in that's where all of his Slaughterverse books are.
Right.
Why they wouldn't go back and maybe reprint this? I wonder if those conversations have been had to go back and put out like a nice big deluxe hardcover of all three. Because I don't know how many people who have read Tynion stuff have read these books. I know a lot of people who are. I've seen.
But you want my prediction?
Shows. Yeah,
my prediction is the 10-year anniversary, which I think would be 2024. Would be the 10 year of Memetic.
For Memetic, yeah.
And I think they are likely to release deluxe hardcovers of Memetic, Cognetic, and Eugenic before they combine them all into one volume.
Like a big reissue for each one of them.
Right. A big deluxe reissue.
Well, that makes sense.
A reflection letter from Tynion 10 years later.
That would, I mean, from a capitalist standpoint, that makes sense because that would make more money. You sell 3 hardcovers versus one. Yeah.
Well, you sell 3 hardcovers and you get to have him reflect on the concept of a medic.
Mm-hmm.
Now that, like when he wrote that memes were static images, now memes are like audio sounds and videos and all kinds of things.
So much more. Yeah.
And post COVID.
I would say, yeah, and also we talked about last week, our relationship to social media, which obviously is a huge part of how Memetic works, is so much greater now. It's so much different now. That would be from the pure capitalism standpoint, that does make sense to re-release them. But I would love to do that. Again, I don't know how many people have read them. As I was saying there, when you go and if you see James Tynion at a show, and I've been lucky to see him a number of times, his booth now, his line now is it's insane. It's totally bananas. When 2017 or whatnot, right around the first time I saw him at a show was right around when Eugenic would have come out, and I knew nothing about Eugenic at the time. I knew him from his DC work, so I didn't know any of his creator-owned stuff at the time. And his line was you can get in real quick, no problem. You could spend time talking to him. Now again, his line gets capped before he even shows up. And all these people are, but I don't know how many of them have like an issue of Memetic or Cognetic or Eugenic.
Right. Maybe
they have an early work like The Woods or something like that, or The Backstagers or something like that. Those, I think maybe got a little more press, a little more praise at the time than the Apocalyptic Trilogy did. But yeah, I would love to see them come out and be reissued so more people can read them. And again, I don't. Again, with his name being such a bigger draw now, it would make sense to me that Boom would want to be like, hey, do you know he had these other books that we did way back when that are out of print now? Now you can get them. Here you go in this deluxe hardcover that's $60 or whatever.
Well, that and like, yeah, I mean, yeah. But you have some big artists come back and do a variant for the deluxe edition. It's easy money, especially with his name on it. And there will be people who think it's a new Tynion book.
Well, and that's the thing. Yeah. I not knowing what his audience, even among his own fans, how many have read all of his older back catalog. When I have a writer that I like, specifically a writer that I like, I always try to go back and read as much of the stuff that I can, because I want to see that progression. I want to see them.
Right. I mean, and the leap in progression that you saw from Memetic to Cognetic is
huge.
Wild.
Yeah, I think
it's meteoric.
There is a clear sense of, I think what you said at the top there about him kind of figuring out some of those lessons, all the things he tried to do, all the things he was trying to do in Cognetic in Memetic, in terms of character and pacing and all of that stuff. He nailed it much better. He got much closer to the bullseye with Cognetic, and just having, again, just getting those reps in, understanding it better, and and maybe having a little clearer sense of where he wanted this story to go. I think it really pays off. It reads better. And again, I like the idea behind Memetic more than I do Cognetic, but I agree. There's no denying that Cognetic, just like empirically, is just objectively a better written,
it's a better
produced story.
It's so I mean, the letter I want to read from him about Memetic, I don't know if you heard this was back in 2019. Stephen Colbert had Tom York of Radiohead on his show, and he opened the interview by saying, "For decades you've been writing music that is uneasy and anxious with regards to society, our government, technology, the general direction of the world. How does it feel to be right about everything? And Tom York said something like, it's cold comfort. But I think there's so much that's there's a lot of clairvoyance in his work, even if it's like obviously the particular mechanics and the scale of escalation is not nearly as bad as what Tynion's playing out here, but he's not pitching these as plausible. He's just saying like, here's how one idea gone unchecked could lead to the end of the world. And that's the whole concept. Now, let's get to our nits to pick, because I do actually have a nit to pick with this book. Sure. I don't know if you have anything substantial.
Not substantial, but go ahead.
Okay. So beginning of issue 2, we get this backstory. The dawn of civilization. This alien brain lands, possesses 6 people, which I thought was going to make Power Rangers. It didn't. It gives them these cognetic powers. And they're basically immortal, or at least don't die of natural causes. Because there's only 4 of them left.
I think so.
They may be able to knock each other out, and it seems like maybe that's happened.
It kind of felt like they were Tolkien elves.
Yes, right.
You live forever unless you're killed. That kind of thing. Yeah,
right.
I felt that too.
Yeah. So my problem with this is like, it gets us into the story and it gets us where we need to go, and it does it quickly. So it's like, it works. Personally, I think it's kind of a dumb direction to take, because the whole premise of the book is, here's one possible way the world could end. And what this book actually boils down to is, here's a way the world could end. If it were a completely other world where this different set of things happened throughout the whole history of the world, this is how it would end. It's like, well, sure, I'll grant you that, but that's nothing about like how our society functions, how human nature would lead us down a dark path. Whereas Memetic was like, okay, but even without the cult leader intentionally designing that, ideas spreading virally and quickly without discernment and discretion could lead to catastrophic things. And it's like, that one, yes, there were aliens in that one, but it didn't need it. Whereas here, this whole thing, all the mechanics of how this work are based on some extraterrestrial thing, which is not part of our world in existence. And so it's not really a way that our world could end.
Yeah, this one is a little more, I guess, intended to be more metaphorical. The idea of
exactly, yes,
yeah, it's not meant to be as literal, as literal as it can be. I guess my nitpick is similar. It is just the idea of the alien consciousness. Again, and I think that comes on the heels of a Memetic of like, again, okay, so extraterrestrial life is involved. Not important though, but it's involved. It's key to what's happening. Because that's in this book, it's the impetus. Well, in both books, it's the impetus for the start of the destruction, the start of the downfall. But it's not important anyway. And so I didn't like that it was like that part is similar there. But I liked the end result, though, the idea of these different hive minds and these 6 siblings, as it were, potentially competing for all that. But yeah, that first step of, does it have to be aliens again? Like, was there another way? Was another way to manifest those powers?
And that's what I've been chewing on.
Yeah, and I don't know if there is, because
you could say there's a technology thing, but then doesn't that seem like just the other 2 books as well?
Yeah, it is. It comes down to and
if you take them as interpretations of religion and say, okay, well, this is like the founding of the Abrahamic religions.
Sure,
it forms these hive minds.
Yeah,
and I think that could be an interesting interpretation. I don't think that's what he was going for.
That feels like a pretty big reach.
Yeah.
But you can definitely, now that you said that, you can definitely layer that on there.
Oh, well, there's certainly people who would view religion in mass as hive mind. Yeah. And there are certainly religious people who,
you could go,
warrant that description.
You could go beyond religion to any sort of ideological thought.
Sure. Political tribes or anything.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't go beyond. I mean, maybe it's intentional or unintentional. I don't know. But again, we're talking about red versus blue. Like that's our main antagonist. Not saying they prescribe to those ideologies, but just the idea that we're talking about red versus blue, and that's how we talk. That's how we're referring to them. Yeah. Any sort of any sort of group think like that, whatever the basis is, you can graft onto the story. So yeah, I think the intention there again was to be more metaphorical. The idea of giving into the collective versus the individual. But yeah, the specific impetus of alien thing falls from the sky, and that's where these powers come from. Especially knowing that has no payoff,
Right.
that isn't why any of them do any of this. They're not doing it in service of it. They claim it was because they got clarity from this of to what human nature actually is, but they're not doing it on behalf of anything. It isn't even like Memetic, where the end result is to call these beings back to Earth.
Right.
It's got no effect on anything. It's just a thing that happens, which leads me to think that, well, could you have made it some other thing that happened? And again, I'm not saying I know the answer or a possibility, because I don't.
But again, it's such a brief thing, and it's like all you need is to get the plane in the air.
Yes. Oh yeah.
And like you just need enough runway to get the story off the ground.
Yeah.
And if you got into some long, convoluted explanation, that's a long, ongoing series.
Yes. Yeah.
This is more of a.
So yeah, it's very direct. You don't got to explain it. Alien things falls from the sky, possesses them, they eat it, and now they have these powers. Boom, go. But yeah, but then I tend to think, well, maybe there could have been some other way to get that going that didn't involve extraterrestrials, that didn't involve alien species or life, or I was going to say technology or whatever it is, or powers, as it were. Could they have manifested in some other way that then would have had no structural effect on the story? You saw the exact same thing. All that matters is that these people gained these powers way back in the day, way back in the day, and they've lived with them, and this is what they can do. So whatever impetus you need to get that story going is all you need. So yeah, that was my little nitpick of this. Like when I was reading, it's like, aliens again. Okay.
Yeah, and I don't want to make too much of the comparison here, but I had the same feeling that I had at the end of the movie Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I'm not saying you can't use aliens. I'm just saying it's dumb.
Well, okay, that's fair. For me, it was because I was, again, looking. I'm saying aliens again because I am fairly or unfairly referencing it back to Memetic, the first book in this trilogy that's not a trilogy. Right. So in my mind, I'm thinking, aliens again, because we did that. In terms of that was the impetus for Memetic, and now it's the genesis of this story as well. And so my nit is just like, well, it could have been something else. Fine, it's aliens, whatever, and you just get through it. And then again, you get to the end. I'm thinking, well, now did it have to be aliens? Because aliens played the exact same role in this that they did in Memetic, which was essentially nothing. They had no effective, they had no actual impact on the story. So that's where my nit comes.
Yeah. And I think and again, this is all under the umbrella. I gave this as 4 out of 5 stars. Yeah. What I'm talking about here is about 4 pages out of a 90 to 100 page thing.
Yeah, it's just that backstory at the beginning of 2. That's it.
And it's like I think there's still a prescient commentary on human nature here. Mm-hmm. I just feel like, why did it have to go this way to get there? Yeah, isn't there something about human nature that could cause this kind of self-destruction?
Yeah.
Rather than having to invoke something outside in order to get to human self-destruction, which this book wasn't even about human self-destruction.
No. Maybe it could have been the idea of, just the idea of if you get enough people to believe your thing, then they become part of your, I don't know.
That's a quote from the Nightly News by Jonathan Hickman.
It's similar to that. Yeah. The idea of, and it's actually an idea that is explored in one of Tynion's books, The Department of Truth. The idea that,
that's what I'm thinking of.
The collective belief of something makes it real. And then it manifests into reality. So all of these oddities, all these things, so you can manipulate the world into believing quote unquote fake news or whatnot, because it will then become real based on the collective belief that it exists. So yeah, I wonder if you could have used that germ to create the hive mind and have it be a power that evolves maybe versus, again, like aliens. But But doesn't it? I'm I think speak for both of us. That doesn't take away from the overall story. It's just you kind of bump on that. And you're just like, oh, aliens, fine, whatever. Move past it and keep going. Right? That is that kind of how you approached it when you read it.
Yeah, and what I was thinking was, this annoyed me from the get go. In At the beginning of the second issue, if I were reading this as it came out in single issue, it would not have stopped me from purchasing the third issue, because it was it was like, well, I'm 2/3 of the way in, right?
And also, and you move past it so quickly, and there's everything else in that second issue, and by the time you end there, right.
But had I heard this is going to be a 12 issue thing and they're oversized, or I think slightly overpriced single issues, I would have been like, this story might be going a direction I don't really want to go down that path.
Or if you were told that it was aliens from the jump, you may not have picked it up.
Right.
Yeah. Like if it were billed as like an alien being gives these.
Yeah, if it was an alien conspiracy tale, I would have been like,
that's a different. But that's an entirely different story at that point.
Yes.
It's a minor inconsequential thing, which I think is why we pick it as a nit, because you're like, well, it ultimately doesn't matter. So why couldn't it have been something different, or maybe even something?
If you need proof that it doesn't matter, it took us over an hour of talking to even get around to it.
That's true. Yeah.
And again, I mentioned the colors. Eric Donovan blows me away in this book. A couple pages when all the police officers commit suicide and they all blow their brains out.
That's a
gorgeous page.
That's one of those. Yeah, I was going to say that it is a beautiful page. That's also wildly horrifying.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm a collector of original art. I probably wouldn't hang that on the wall.
Not great. Maybe not great for your daughter. She grows up to see that one.
Well, yeah, not great for my Zoom background at work either.
But no, there are some. He's asked to draw some pretty ridiculous things. Again, much like the end of Memetic, when he's drawn the giant flesh towers, he has to draw these two giant, again, like kaiju golems or whatever, that are just made of people as well, and they're moving together like you see a swarm of bees or drones or whatnot, and they're picking up buildings and using them as weapons or whatnot. Like, it's a fairly absurd idea, but he's still able to capture, I think, the people on the ground. I think this book more so than Memetic, just by the nature of it. He's asked to capture reaction shots much more heavily here, because he's got to have a lot of people looking up like, what the hell am I looking at? There's a lot of, oh my God, what is this moments? A lot of people who have to be completely lost in like beyond the ability to function or speak. There's a lot of just wide-eyed. There's got to be horror. There's got to be terror. There's got to be a little bit of fascination, a little bit of wonder. He's got to have all those in there. And I think he does a really good job with a lot of those close-ups on the characters. It doesn't matter what characters they are. Random background characters, random cops, other people there. He manages to capture those expressions and those experiences. I think with his character work.
Yeah. By the way, when Annie dies, the original Annie, she passes her consciousness through a pigeon to an FBI officer.
Yeah.
And I'm
police
like,
officer. Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm sorry. Why could we not just have a safety net of like 100,000 birds and reptiles and whatever? Like,
I think,
go to an animal shelter and just build yourself a backup drive.
I think you can. That goes back to Annie's whole thing of she just only has two people. Only ever two.
Right. No, yeah. But I'm talking about pigeons.
Well, I think, maybe what we see at the end when she talks to Yellow, maybe they divvied up a little bit. Like, Yellow was going into the sea. Like he spent his time with marine creatures. But yeah, no, I think I think for Annie, I think specifically for Annie, for Red, it's all about what she thinks her powers are good for and how she views it. And so she doesn't want to take over an animal or anything like that. She doesn't want to take any more than she.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's like, I understand that mass human mind control doesn't feel great to you. Yeah. I don't know if I feel that way about, planting your consciousness as a backup in some pigeons. It doesn't feel as morally as consequential.
Yeah.
However, as we've established, Annie, like a good character in terms of like how she is written, but a horrible character in terms of
Yeah,
like,
yeah, not a good person, not a good
right,
person, or well, that may be harsh. She's not better or worse than any human, you
right.
know, and she's only seemed that way because she has this, extraordinary ability and what she chooses to do and not do with it. But I don't think she's presented as any more than just another person, which is a flawed individual, which is the nature of being human. They are going to act selfish in a certain way. We expect or we want people in these situations to act with capital I integrity, right? To act selflessly, to act for the greater good. But in reality, we're all just selfish beings. And when faced with those choices, we're probably not going to do the noble, quote unquote, noble thing for everybody. We're going to try and do the thing that we want. We're going to try to save ourselves or reach the end that we want to get to. And I think that's what they show with Annie. That's who Annie is. And again, I don't think it's not about a commentary on that she is good or bad. It's just that she is just like everybody else in that she's not better than anybody else, which maybe she felt that she was.
Right. And she did not seek out this power.
Yes.
She didn't want it. She's
Yes.
just forced to live with it.
Yeah.
And I think
and her choices of how she lives
makes her somewhat sympathetic.
Yeah, you can judge how she's decided to live with them vis-a-vis Blue, who I think you are meant to believe that, like, regardless of what you're doing here, like mass mind control of all the people, bad. Like that we can say that's not the way you should go, but they're also not saying that Annie's choice is right either.
Right.
They're not saying that this is what you should do with this power. It's just that it's almost like ultimately maybe it doesn't really matter because again, we're making this larger comment on humanity, this larger comment on this need or desire, or the perceived need or desire of humans to be part of the collective, that individuality is a mistake and that it's better if we're not thinking on our own, because left to our own devices, we just screw things up because we are incapable of making a choice, and the choices we do make are all wrong. That's kind of the subtext here of humans constantly screwing up. And what that leads us to is being open to like the first good idea that we think we hear,
Right.
So it's kind of the one-eyed man leading the blind men kind of thing.
Well, now speaking of one-eyed man and blind man, my final nitpick is beginning of issue 3, where they're 2,338 years ago. Very specific number.
Yes, very specific. Yeah.
And they've got Blue in a pit.
Mm-hmm.
Presumably that's like his punishment for going rogue, and they've somehow reined him in just to that one.
I assume they
body.
bury him in the pit. I don't know. I assume they.
Okay, but like animals, critters, insects, whatever, could still theoretically get down there, interact with him before he's dead.
Yeah.
Gouge his eyes out. That's how it spreads. Let him live, or don't let him live. But start with the eyes, my guys. Like,
I was gonna say maybe I guess
bind his hands, put a blindfold on if you don't have the stomach for, But it's like, oh my gosh.
Well, maybe we're giving too much credit to. You're giving too much credit to the
Neanderthals,
our early Stone Age ancestors here. So there are questions,
tactical mistakes.
Yeah. Well, but again, I think there are also then questions of, can they actually be killed? Because if they can, they should have just killed him. I guess the implication at the end, the way you read it, the way that I read it at the end was that maybe those are the only 3 left of the 6. The other 3 weren't out there.
That's how I interpreted it. Well, yeah. So you have blue, red, yellow.
But there is a reading at the other 3 just like don't care. They're doing their thing and they don't care what blue or they either don't care or they condone, or that like they're maybe yellow is speaking for all of them, all the rest of them. I don't know, because if they could be killed, you would think that maybe we just kill this guy and get rid of him if he's such a problem.
That's my thinking, and and I think it's interesting that only the primary colors remain, because what we got was all the primary and secondary colors. We got blue, yellow, red, green, orange, purple. The only ones left are blue, yellow, red, as if things have been stripped away, and it's down to these 3 now.
I didn't think about any intentionality in that.
No, it's probably just random button pushing.
Or it's probably just like here are three distinct colors. Make it easy.
Right.
It's very, very obvious. There's no potential.
If yellow and orange are having a dialogue,
yes, is that blue? Is that purple? Maybe there's you don't have to rely on the printer being a little off or something like that. So maybe that was the case just to make them distinct. I don't know. I think that is a fair criticism of the actions of the characters. In terms of the decisions they would have made then.
So I wondered what that purpose that whole thing even served. When we come back to it, I think it's for Blue's little speech about how these things are speaking to him, and we're supposed to show them all that humanity can be, and that's one massive collective controlled by me.
Yeah. It's meant to show the rift, the divide specifically between red and blue. That maybe you could argue that they were the two eldest ones, of their, I guess what they consider their siblings there, but it's meant to show the rift between them and the ideological difference between them. But again, by the way,
I think the final page of the book makes it seem like, not from the perspective of humans' moral code, but he actually is acting the way the people who gave them the power wanted them to, because yellow is saying, I can hear them sing again. They can see us, and they're finally coming to make things right.
Yeah.
So whatever he's done is actually what they've been asking him to do, and yellow can hear them singing. So it's interesting that the singing thing comes up again, which was big in Memetic.
Yes.
And the final page of this is the top half of this mass human blob in London. Somewhere.
Yeah, it's in London. Yep.
And very similar to the bottom half of an alien blob leaving the Earth's atmosphere in Memetic. And then here I love how, just one little coloring detail that I wonder if it was like an impulse move from the colorer or if this was in the script, but using the colors of the six powers in the stars.
Yes, I love that. The way it cascades down.
Right.
Yeah.
As if, oh no, this is an extraterrestrial force. They see this. They are singing. They're happy. This is what humanity was supposed to do. And here they come. That's
a good call.
I think that's how it's supposed to read. But, it's three great creators all working hand in hand. Again, beautiful lettering from Steve Wands. It just goes without saying. And again, I think it reads quick because there's no narration. It's just dialogue.
Yeah. There is a lot of they use
speechifying.
They use texting a lot. So there's a lot of the back and forth of using that effect. Which that basically, I mean, text bubbles are just like representation of texting on your phone is just a word box, the word balloon,
Yeah, it's in-story narration.
Yeah, essentially so.
But it's no fourth wall breaking.
Yeah, there is no narrator to the story. But
we don't have a particular point of view. It's just wherever, our point of view is Tynion's point of view.
Yes, yeah. We have the
we go where he takes us.
What is that, like third person omniscient?
I think it's limited third person omniscient.
Yeah.
Third person limited omniscience. There it is.
Yeah. So, but no, I think this goes back to the idea of just better storytelling technique. It's a better paced story. I think there's something that you talk about a lot more than I do, but the idea of a consistent read.
Mm-hmm.
When you start reading a book, it isn't like something I know that bothers you a lot more than me, because it doesn't bother me at all. But I do notice it when you have something like this, where it is a very consistent read page to page.
Right?
You're not
bam,
having
bam.
There's not one page of 95 word balloons and then like a half splash page of just one big image. It's a very consistent read, and I think the story is gripping enough and compelling enough because, again, the way that Tynion delivers these plot notes, again, that idea of escalation, the way that he keeps stepping it up, and you're like, oh Jesus, that, like, it's the Ron Burgundy, right?
Right.
That
escalated quickly.
Yeah, exactly. That sort of thing of every time the story, a couple of pages in, no, boom, we're ratcheting it up way past beyond where you thought it was going to go, and now we're into this next beat of it, and then you're going to live in that for a little bit, and then it's going to go even further now than when you even thought was possible. So I think it's a gripping and compelling story, and I think from a mechanic standpoint, I really like it, and I can appreciate it, especially when compared to Memetic, and seeing creators get better, and like seeing it literally on the page when you read it, like, oh, this is just the same people, just better at this now,
Right. Yeah, and again, well, like, we both really enjoyed Memetic. We spent an hour and 40 minutes last week talking about it.
Yeah.
So no shade at Memetic. It's just like, I don't know what to say other than it's like,
well, look, when you have a body of work, doesn't matter whether you write 10 things or 50 things, one of those things has to be worst. Like, it's just, that's how things work. Something is always going to be the best thing you've done, and something is always going to be the worst thing it is. And I'm not saying Memetic is the worst thing has ever done, but just because you see progression in someone's work and someone's art, it's not meant to denigrate what you've done there previously, because that's probably as good as what you could have done then. And if that's as good as you could only ever do, that's where things become a problem. If you never get better, if you don't recognize, or if you can't see and maybe take some criticism from your peers or editors or whatnot and say, here's some of the things that I don't think you did well, or if you can recognize yourself, here's some of the things that I don't think worked, and you can make it better the next time out. That's a good thing in my mind, saying that this is a step forward and this is a better constructed book, because it shows that you're learning. It shows that you understand what the storytelling you're trying to do is, and how maybe you didn't get it quite right the first time. Now you're getting it better the second time now. And again, when you read Tynion stuff now, when you read his anything he's written in creator-owned stuff in the last 3 or 4 years, it's so good, and it grabs you right away. There is no downtime, there's no lagging. Not that you're thrown in media res, is that you understand the kind of story you're going to get right from the jump, because he's gotten so much better. And to see that leap from this book, from Memetic to Cognetic in just a year, to see that so quickly, is awesome. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. Well, that's all the notes I have. You got anything else that we need to talk about?
That's all for me. That's all for me. I'm out.
Okay. Well, then I will say to everyone, Eugenic is hard to find. Join me on Hoopla. Read it from your public library. Yes, find it if you can, by all means, especially those Robbie Rodriguez variants.
Yeah, if you can. Yeah. What say about those variants is that each one of them, issues 1, 2, and 3, they're an homage to a different story in the Apocalyptic Trilogy. So Eugenic #1 variant is Robbie Rodriguez's take on Eugenic. Issue 2, his variant, is an homage to Cognetic, and then issue 3 is an homage to Memetic. So him getting to do that and have his little take, have a little fun on each one of the stories. They're very cool if you can find them. But yeah, if you can't find the issues, you can't find the physical print, the digital is always an option. Find Hoopla. If you have to go to, Bezos.com or whatever to find it, so be it. But go out and find the book, read it any way you can. So we can you can join us here next week, and we can finish up talking about the end of the world for now.
Yes, and that is the end of the podcast for now. So we will see you next week for Eugenic 1 through 3, and we'll do a wrap of our first stint on Tynion. I am so sure this podcast is not finished discussing Tynion after next week.
We'll probably come and talk about him some more sometime down the line. He's one of those guys that when we start revisiting creators, he'll be on the list definitely. So,
yep. All right. Well, until then, we will see you next week. Thanks for listening.